bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you're planted. So be grateful that you have a job, number one, because there's a lot of people out there that don't have one. Be grateful that you're in a job that's like awesome. Like we train athletes and then we go to sports games. So we have an awesome job, like crush it, like crush the job, like, and not just the job around the job. Like be the person in the athletic staff that like you're at, or wherever you're at, like your organization, your company, be the person that like people want to be around. Be the person that like when somebody needs help with something, you're like, oh, that's not my job. That's not on my job description. Don't do that. Be the person that like picks up the trash off the field and not complain about it.
Welcome to the Talking Shop podcast, where I'm here to share stories, lessons, and experiences in sports performance and professional development. Today, I'm joined by Angie Brambley-Moyer of Princeton University, and a little bit about how are you doing today, first off?
I'm doing great. And you know what? Thanks for having me. This is great seeing you and talking to you again.
So how her and I know each other is I interviewed her on the Samson Strength Coach Collective podcast, and we had a super awesome chat. It went so well. We chatted for I don't even know how long after we stopped recording. And I said, hey, I really enjoyed this. I think that you have a lot of awesome insight and value to offer. And I'd love to have you on my own podcast because I remember that you had some questions about, TSP. So here we are now. So I'm going to treat this like a 2.0 episode where it's a little bit more personal questions. So I'll put the Samson episode in the show notes so the listener can go listen to that. So Angie's going to talk a little bit about herself, but we're going to assume kind of all that general background info is in that other episode. So for those who are not familiar, could you please tell a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I was an athlete my whole life, and I fell in love with sports performance as a high school athlete, I guess I should say, middle school, high school athlete. I have an older brother, a successful athlete, and that's kind of how I got into this field, and just knowing that, while I was a good athlete, know that if I took extra steps in performance, strength and conditioning, nutrition, recovery, that I could improve my own athletic prowess, if you will. And that's kind of how I fell in love with it. And I went to college knowing that this is kind of the area that I wanted to be in. I got a job at Princeton very early on in my career after my graduate assistantship. And, this September, I think it was September 16th, was my 17-year anniversary at Princeton University. So I know that I've been there a long time, and my longevity at Princeton is almost unheard of in our field. I love the place, and there's so much, I see the value that I've added over the years, and just the years of athletes that, still connect with me. And they do that not because they have to, because they want to. So I know that I've made some sort of difference, hopefully positive, probably negative at the time, but I feel that if they're still coming up and reaching out to me and talking to me when they see me at events, it was a positive experience in a way. So, why leave? Why leave a place like that? So here I am, 17 years later, Princeton University.
And then also, so from your first year with Princeton to now, you've accumulated also an assistant director role, correct? So how long has that been a thing? And then what's your official title? I didn't want to mess that up in the beginning.
That's okay. My title is Associate Head Strength and Conditioning Coach, working on that that head strength and conditioning coach position, but I'm the acting director. I mean, my job, I lead our strength and conditioning program. I mean, titles aside, I am doing the job of director of strength and conditioning. I hired the staff, the strength and conditioning staff. We do have a director of performance. But when it comes to strength and conditioning, it's, I guess my decision, if you will. And I've been in this position it'll be 3 years in January that I've been in this position. And it's been great. It's been great. I mean, it's been a learning experience, to say the least.
Fantastic. So we are going to hop right into the thick of it. So something we were chatting about a little bit earlier, and partly for my own selfish reasons to want to chat about this, because I'm in an interesting point in my career where I'm no longer in a box of school. I officially have my master's and I'm adulting, and it's super fun, totally. And I can literally do whatever I want, and kind of just trying to decide where I want to go, what field or sector, what level, and all of these things. And it's every job is going to have its challenges, and every job is going to have a certain amount and type of fulfillment. I got that from one of my good friends. And every job is going to have its pros and cons, but it's like there's going to be different challenges, and it's challenges that you want, or it's challenges that you kind of have to deal with. And then it's fulfilling in different kind of ways. So if you could kind of just chat about, so of course, with all of these crazy times that we're going through right now, the decision to stay at Princeton for such a long time, like you said, you love it there, and like you've helped build that department into what it is. I think I remember it was like just 2 or 3 of you, and now there's 6 or 7 strength coaches, and now that you're doing all the hiring and all that kind of stuff. So if you could just chat about those components of a job, like the challenges and how fulfilling and deciding to stay and leave, and kind of just navigating and thinking about career moves.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I, took a very general path when it comes to, I worked my way up, from being a staff of two to now being a staff of 6. And, just as, my title being assistant and training my teams. And that's what I did, and then as we grew staff and me just having the longevity there, I mean, I had unofficial seniority on the staff, just having been there for so long. So when we hired new people, it was kind of like me showing the ropes of who we are at Princeton Strength and Conditioning. And, all still while having those small leadership opportunities, all still while, training my teams, I mean, I've had 6 teams forever since I've been there. So, I still got, I got those small learning experiences from, just, bringing staff aboard and whatnot. But, obviously I always want to be on the floor to some extent. Strength and conditioning is my passion. It just is I'm still training Squat-tober, and I love that aspect of what I do, and it keeps me young. I feel like it keeps me young. I just feel like it keeps me hungry to train, and I love just being around young people and whatever. So I want to always stay in that game, but having transitioned to a more leadership position was a very large turning point in my career. And it wasn't something it kind of, we got a new athletic director, and she wanted to create a director of performance. And, our director of strength and conditioning at the time, moved into that position, and he's currently there, and he's our director of performance. And he's also a brother to me. I've been, I sat in an office with him, just him and I for 13 years. So it was a natural transition, and I'm super happy that he got that position, but it was a position of not training teams. It was a position of him, more administrative, meetings. And while it's a position where he gets to connect strength and conditioning, athletic medicine, sports psychology, nutrition, administration, all those areas to what we do, it still wasn't him in touch with athletes on the floor on a daily basis. And I know that he went through kind of an emotional transition there. And I wouldn't say that was his favorite transition. When he took that position to, take that more of an administrative role, while he's great at it, he is absolutely spectacular at it. He missed training athletes. And I remember being I don't want that position. I just remember saying, if you don't get this, I don't want it. I want to train athletes. And I still want to train athletes. Even if that position opened and, he went someplace else, I don't think I want that position. I want to be in the weight room. But as far as leading the staff, it was something that I was now officially doing, if you will. Rather than just onboarding people as we hired new staff, this was okay, now I'm your leader of this program. And it wasn't the easiest of transitions, because it was going from these people being essentially my colleagues. We all had assistant strength and conditioning coach titles, to me now being their leaders. And while I've, had, good relationships with them, it's still kind of an awkward transition to be hey, now I'm responsible for you, and I'm responsible for like the things that you're doing on a day-to-day basis, good or bad. I need to make sure that we're all in the right place here, that we're all a team, that we're all developing, all those things. And it wasn't the easiest of transitions. Like some people were easier than others, but it was a learning experience. And right off the bat, like I dove into like our university, Princeton offers a lot of professional development just within the university. So I dove into a manager certificate course just because I was just like, well, I know that it really ultimately takes experience, like getting a certification. Like you're learning the material, but ultimately, like you have to be in the position to learn who you are as a leader, or like who you are as a strength coach after getting a certificate. Like you need that kind of internship space before you actually like develop who you are. And I kind of got the leadership position and then took the course. It was like the opposite way around. So I was kind of like, the course like helped me understand, the university more, like helped understand how to give, I guess you would say like professional feedback. And those types of things and good insight on things. But really it comes down to practical application. And so it's been a work in progress. I mean, I definitely have developed in the last 3 years as a leader. I mean, just who I am, like who I hire, how I hire, the questions that we ask. I mean, I remember like having one interview for one position and then saying, hey, listen, we need to add to this interview process. Like, this is what we're going to do now. Now we're going to actually, I mean, I know they do this at other universities, but we weren't currently doing it. Like, we're going to have them take some of our staff through a warm up. We want to see how they coach. It's not going to just us be sitting down and, and them telling me about it. I kind of want to see them do it, and so we implemented that. So just like implementing how you're going to hire and like the questions you ask, even in an interview, like I just started changing that and just adding like my own questions just to kind of get to know somebody. I mean, in the field, usually it's likely that you're going to know somebody that knows somebody that's going to give you, some sort of information about the person that's applying for your job, but not all the time, like you might be doing a blind hire. So I want to get better at blind hires, even if I do know, where this person's coming from or somebody that knows somebody. I just think they need to fit into our staff, into our personality. And that is something that I'm still learning how to do. So that's kind of like where we're at right now. And this is a continuous process of learning to grow as a leader and knowing who I am as a person, and who I am as a leader, all while still training my athletes and continuing to want to get buy-in there and learning how to be better with them.
And speaking on the challenges of the jobs you mentioned, going from the assistant to the associate head, and then just comparing and contrasting from the associate head to the director, well, there's obviously the pros of the financial implications of having that director role. And also there's pros and cons of going from assistant to associate head, but also associate head technically isn't the director, but also right. The challenges of admin, more of those responsibilities, putting everything together. Well, you get rid of the challenge of working with athletes, and that's also one of the fulfilling components also is being on the floor every day with them. And this is something that I've been wrestling with because I have 2 years of college experience, plus on and off for 4 years in the private field. And I'm not saying that coaching a variety of different athletes and having to be creative and all these different things, because they don't have to be there. You have to make it so they want to be there. And you're going to get a variety of different athletes and skill sets and all these different things. Like 100%, I'm becoming a better coach of it. But some challenges that I believe I want is something that demands the technical best of me, as opposed to just kind of being creative and thinking on my feet. But then also on the flip side, my mentor, he made a comment. He's like, you could blindfold me, put me anywhere, give me any client, and I'll crush it, because I've had that 7-year-old that doesn't want to be there. I've had 100 high school football players, and I've had 10 of our NFL veterans that are all banged up, so I've just had to figure it out. And just having this kind of chat with him, it's like, if he went to college, it's like, what, I have 2 teams and I get them 3 days a week for 8 months a year. and they have to be there and they're motivated and they're athletic, like what do I have to sell, and just like compare, and he's a chaos guy. Like he loves the chaos, and someone who needs a little bit more structure, but then also kind of the fulfilling aspect. So just comparing and contrasting a relatively smaller school like Princeton to, let's say, a bigger school where you enjoy working with 6 teams versus 1 or 2. And if it's a bigger school, maybe they are there for just athletics. But Princeton, obviously being a very prestigious school, it's going to be a more kind of holistic chance to lead them as well. So if you could just chat about kind of the fulfilling aspects of being at a school, like, because there's obviously the allure, Power 5, you get all the gear, and I love gear myself, don't get me wrong. But if you could just chat about part of the reason to stay at Princeton is because what you find valuable in the fulfillment of it all. If you could just chat on that a little bit.
Yeah. First of all, I want to meet your mentor. I mean,
He's awesome.
I feel like I could still learn to like think on my feet. I'm spoiled. I mean, I kind of knew I wanted to work in college. Like I wanted to work with, I consider college athletes elite athletes. So let's just go with that. And I knew that this was the setting I wanted to be in. I mean, having tapped into, personal training. I worked at sports training facilities. My husband owned a sports training facility. I'm familiar with that industry, and it's just, and my husband is he is a fabulous strength and conditioning coach, even though that's like not his current field, and he learned a lot of things about athletic medicine because you can't just be like, go to the trainer type of thing, so there's a lot of great aspects to being in the private sector like you are. And like I'm spoiled in areas that like kind of limit me in a lot of ways, because first, like I just send someone off to athletic trainer instead of having to like figure out what's going on. I mean, obviously like there's always a certain level of expertise there, and you're not trying to like overstep that, but still like the figuring out of like what to do with somebody that wants to continue to train with you, but also may have some injuries. I know how to treat injuries. I know how to modify workouts, but like really digging in to something like that, like some more of like a Mike Roberts type of system, where, like that kind of stuff, and, so, I mean, there's a lot of development that goes in that area. And I think that I'm limited in a lot of ways, because I've been in a university setting for so long. So don't downplay like the benefits of, being in the private sector. But I also do know that I don't like to have to sell. Like, though, that's one thing I know about myself is that especially as a young strength and conditioning coach, I was like, I want them to have to be there.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to sell myself as a young strength and conditioning coach. Like I didn't know how to do that. Now I think I would do a lot better job of it if I were in the private sector. But I just wanted to train, and I just wanted athletes to train. And that's part of the maturing process of who I am now, and teaching young people about that transition into like just being obsessed with training to, this is a people job and we're a service industry type of thing. But in regard to the Princeton aspect, I think that I come from, while the university and the Ivy League has become so diverse in, the type of backgrounds and students that they have there, there's also still like a certain level of like privilege that goes along with it. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying what it is really, and I think that, me coming from more of a blue collar background, I offer a lot to, I guess that like hardened me a little bit, and hardened me in a way where, like I'm like this blue collar girl that like could not get into Princeton University if I tried, even now. And, like, just, and then part of my personality, like the directness of like who I am, like I'm direct. I really am. I'm direct, and it's not soft sometimes, I'm just the tell you what I think kind of girl. And, because, I'm all about efficiency, and I feel like that's the best way to get, whether a good or bad a reaction, like efficiency is my track, and I want to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. This is why I don't enjoy snowboarding, because it's like, you're supposed to enjoy the journey down the hill. And I'm just like, just go down the hill. Maybe racing would be my thing, but whatever. The point is that, like I want efficiency, and And like, that's kind of like part of my personality, just to kind of communicate that way, which again, as you know, somebody that's been in the field for a long time and has matured as a professional, knowing that like, while efficiency is important, you know, there's like, you might need to like soften up how you say things, Angie. And but I think that that is still very, that is still who I am. And that's what a lot of sport coaches appreciate about me. And they appreciate like somebody being so direct and not like, you know, fluffing things to make them feel good about what they're doing. And I'm like, this is our goal. This is our purpose. And like, sometimes it's going to be fun. We're gonna have a good time and it's going to feel good or not terrible. And then sometimes it's not going to feel great. But just know that we have this purpose and what our purpose is, and just like keep thinking about the purpose. And a lot of coaches rely on me to like express that a lot, like, you know, whether it be in team meetings, like motivational speaking wise, like just expressing like our purpose. And because I didn't recruit these kids, you know, and it's different with a sport coach. Like, they recruit a kid and they sit in the kid's home. I mean, not now, they don't, but they were when they were recruiting, and you know, like talking to their parents and saying like, your child is my child for the next 4 or 5 years. And, you know, like there's a certain level of responsibility that goes with like, you know, nurturing, that is the word I should say, like nurturing that, like, and we all want the best for these kids. Don't get me wrong. I want the best for them too. But I mean, I don't get to choose who I get, you know, and, you know, sometimes you get the athlete that is super talented and the one that's not. And you know, and that like also super talented and that's just a gamer and just doesn't want to have anything to do with strength and conditioning. And then you have the one that is like, you know, this can really help me and I'm going to dig into this, blah, blah, blah. And my directness is like important in those times, you know. And then when like your question about Princeton, I haven't forgotten it. Your question about Princeton specifically is that I feel that like Princeton needs, like our athletes, even our students, like they need a little hardening up. They need a little directness. They need a little somebody telling them the truth, and you know, them not being the best everywhere. Because like you have to think about this, like our kids, not only like with most athletes that are recruited to me in college, were probably the best at their high school teams, but also they were the best students. Like they were the best everywhere, you know. And to come here and, you know, at Princeton, a lot of times this is the first time kids have heard the word no, you know. And you know, like a former football coach said that to me. And I was like, wow, that I never thought of it like that, but he's right, you know. And us saying that it's going to be as easy as maybe you thought it was, because you can't think your way through being a better athlete. You can't think your way out of this, you know, or into it. You have to actually work. And I'm not saying that you're not willing to, and I'm not saying you didn't work hard to get into the university, but like there's work to go here, you know. And I love to have a good time and I love to laugh and joke, but you know, I actually think that it's the expectations that I hold with these kids where, you know, it's that next level expectation. And all strength coaches probably do this. In fact, I know they do, you know. That's what our job is. Our job is to get an athlete to like reach their potential. And most of these kids, like I would say a lot of Princeton kids thought like that, you know, they just want to come and play because they've reached their potential. And I'm like, no, actually you could be better. You could be better. And that's hard for them to hear. But if you deliver it properly, like they respect it, you know? And that's kind of like where I am here. And I say that because, and I keep like at this point, like I wasn't always like this. If you interviewed me back, you know, like 15 years ago, I wouldn't have these things to say about where I'm at. You know, I just probably want to talk about training and, you know, it's all about the barbell, you know, and it's not. It's, you know, it's about people and it is about the barbell. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we don't get strong without that, you know, I mean, or an implement, if you will, but like it's about people, and it doesn't matter how good your program is really if you don't get buy-in, you know? So, I mean, because you got to have a terrible program and get great buy-in and then have the best program ever and not get any. So, I mean, I'd rather be the person with terrible program and get buy-in so they're doing something, you know? And this is kind of like where, in this time, since my university is still remote, this is where, like, that's actually really testing you as a strength coach and how much buy-in you actually got from these athletes. showing them the importance of the training and talking to them about training and talking to them about consistency. It's not like there's only so many things you can do, whether you have a gym or you don't have a gym, if it's open, it's not open, all the things, but the consistency of training, the importance of what we're doing and why we're doing it, it's the purpose, it's the mission, like that, like who we are as strength coaches at my university and those that are still pretty much remote or not in school, that aspect of who we are, coaches, being tested right now. And I love it. Like I got a freshman emailing me from the lacrosse team this morning saying, hey, I've been trying to do these like, regular gym workouts, but I'm struggling. Can I get the program that's limited equipment? I'm like, I was just saying, I'm so happy you reached out to me. Yes, you can. And knowing that she clearly is doing some sort of the program, because she wouldn't have known that if she wasn't, like just asking like, hey, I need something more here because my situation is different than somebody else's. And I'm like, yes, that's the first thing I say to all those emails is like, I'm so happy you reached out to me, because that means that I'm getting that buy-in, she was a freshman, so she doesn't know me yet, but the culture of the team has expressed to this particular person that, hey, this is what we do and this is why we do it and we need to prepare and this is important. So like, let's celebrate that.
And not to make like a kind of aha moment, but being remote and you have to like sell why it's important and sell why you have to be in on this stuff and how there's value in really every experience. And not to say, and like, I don't know if it's a phrasing thing. I'm not trying to like nitpick technicalities, but like there's different kinds of sellings in different sectors. And like, just as much as you have to get kids to want to show up in the private field, you have to get kids to want to try in the college field, even though they have to be there. And I think that there's value in every opportunity if you see it and if you make it so. And maybe I'm a little biased because I'm in the private field right now, and I have to get an interview to talk it through, because on paper it doesn't look, there's some people that value it more or less, but kind of just as you spoke through the different challenges and the different types of fulfillment that you have in being a D1, a smarter, but a little bit of a smaller school, I want to tie this into kind of an action step as I've been having my networking journey, reaching out to people, just asking interesting questions and hearing their perspectives. A lot of the pro people that I've talked to, they're like, yeah, it's really honestly not all it's cut out to be. Like these guys are freaks and they're paid millions of dollars to play their sport. Like some of them are interested in training, some of them couldn't care less. And if they don't want to show up, like who am I to tell the guy that's making 15 times what I'm making that he has to do a squat? Like if he doesn't want to work out, he doesn't want to work out. And in the off season, they go to their guy, and all these different things. So if I had to tie this into action, kind of trying to figure out and maneuver where the listener wants to go as a professional, is just like have those conversations with people so you can go and do it yourself, or you can ask people who have been there, done that. And that's why there's been so much value in having someone above me in the private field, my mentor, where I realized that there is so much value in the private field where they don't have to be here every day. Is it 1 day a week, 2 days a week? I had a 12-year-old yesterday that didn't want to be there. And then I had 10 middle schoolers. It was super cold outside on the grass. It was kind of slick. And it was funny. It was raining and the day before, and I was like, oh gosh, like, am I going to have to go on Zoom and all of this stuff? And then I went to the facility just in case I had to go to the field, and the sun came out and I'm like, it's going to be soaking. The kids don't want to be there, but I'm going to have to be creative because we're on grass. We all have awful tennis shoes on. No one has cleats. And there's these skills that I'm going to develop today on having to take them through an hour speed and agility workout on a wet grass without cleats. And whatever I'm going to have to figure out, it's going to make me a better coach, and it's funny with my Whoop, like ever since I had this convo with my mentor about how I can maximize being in the private field. Because over the summer when I was looking for a job, it's funny, I was like, I'll be out of here by July or August. And look at me now, it's October 1st. And over the summer, I was kind of just like waiting to leave. And I had this talk with my mentor about how do I use where I am now to help me get to where I want to go. And honestly, like my numbers have been insane on my Whoop just because I'm so much more into my coaching because I'm realizing the value in it. But also, like, if I have an idea of where I want to go, then that helps me maximize where I am now. So if I had to tie into an action step, reach out to that Power 5 coach that has one school. or one team. Reach out to that smaller D1. Reach out to that D3 coach. Reach out to that major league team. Reach out to that minor league team, because I had these perceptions of big time sports. I had these perceptions of big time schools, and then you chat with them, and they're like completely different. Like, these are just vague assumptions that I'm making about, like, I've never been there. So it's like, you can go do it yourself. You can just ask other people. And it's been interesting to hear kind of your perspectives on the smaller D1 versus the bigger D1. And then my mentor talking about, well, if I was at a school with 1 or 2 teams and they all had to be there, like I would, like he said, he would crush it, not to make him sound kind of cocky, but there's these challenges that you find fulfilling or not fulfilling, and things that vibe with who you are, being a little bit blue collared, so where you can be a little bit hard on them. And that's a setting where they need it. Princeton's an elite university, like, I think we can all agree on that. Versus if you go to a bigger school where they're just there to ball out, and like their talent has gotten there and their talent might continue to take them there, So then if that has inspired you for any kind of other talking points, but if I had action, it would be to ask people that are where you think you want to go, and ask them, what do you find challenging that you enjoy? What do you find challenging that you don't enjoy? And why is it fulfilling to you, and why is it not? I think that would help a lot of people try to figure out where they want to go, for sure.
I feel that I agree with you 100%. I mean, like, this is why with our internships, there's some universities that require different levels of, credits for internships. And as to our internship program, as it grew, it got to the point where, like, if you do like a, 3 credit internship, that's like 10 hours a week. And I was like, 10 hours a week is not giving you any information about like how we do things and how collegiate strength and conditioning actually works. Like, you need to be here at the very least 20 hours a week. Like, you need to learn, if anything, how to grind. And if that means that you're like still taking classes and then coming to your internship and you're tired and you don't have a lot of time and blah, blah, well, at least you're getting an understanding of like how to grind. Like, you need to have that ability to grind, and I feel that it's important for young people to understand that. Our field has evolved a lot since I've been young, and grinding is all we knew because we were so few and far between in what we do. And now we're a field that's growing, and it's great, but the grind is still there. And whether you're private sector or not, you need to hustle, grind, whatever you want to call it. Like, you have to have the ability to do it. And if you think you're just going to walk in and things are going to go your way, you got it wrong. So I think that for a young strength and conditioning coach, I absolutely agree. Like, spend some time at a collegiate setting, spend some time at a private sector setting, talk to those strength and conditioning coaches. Like, when I got, a job opportunity came my way, I called people, and I've been in this field for a long time, but it was going from like multiple teams to not having a lot of teams, and seeing like where I feel like most of my value is. Do I want to, like, how many, like, what are my touch points? Like, do I want the touch points of like multiple teams, or I want touch points of 1 or 2, and like, where do I see my value? And you made a great point about the differentiation between like a smaller D1 school and a larger D1 school. And you're absolutely right. It's like talking about the NFL, and they're saying it's not all it's cracked up to be because like they're freaks and blah, blah, or they've gotten there on their skill alone. You're absolutely right. I'm not saying that you can't help them, because you can, because sometimes you may be a super skilled basketball player, but that's how you got that college scholarship. But then you come in and you can't squat to death, and you're squatting, and I'm having you hold a TRX because you need to learn how to train even through a full range of motion. And this isn't about even strength at this point. This is about like mobility and longevity in your game, and so like, sometimes they are freaks, and you're going to get, those random people that can just do everything, but you're also going to get those like random freak skilled athletes that can't. So there's still like the ability to help them there. I like the value that I provide with like where I'm at. Like, I love touching lots of athletes, and there are so many benefits to having just one team, like quality of life, and or maybe one team and it be a smaller team. I think that like if you're a football strength and conditioning coach at the college level, while you may have one team and a staff of 5, I'm still at Power 5 school. I'm not saying that it's not even easy at Princeton. And, there's a lot that goes into like that culture of that sport, so it depends on the sport as well. But I think you want to know where you can add value. And I think that as a young strength and conditioning coach, it definitely is important to talk to people and mentor and ask questions and be involved in a lot of things. Like because we get interns that come to, like, they think that the internship that they're entering into is way different than they think. They're going to come in, they're going to spot a couple people, they're going to do their own bodybuilding workout in the corner and call it a day. No, that's not how it's going to work. If you want to put your stamp on our Princeton internship program, and if you want to ever use us as a reference, you're going through this program and you're going to get a grade for it, whether it goes to an academic grade or not. We're going to tell you how, we're going to be direct with you on your performance, because we're not putting our name behind you if you can't do this job and we don't feel like you can, So I speaking to the young population, I definitely go out there and talk to people and have a mentor, have multiple mentors, and, squash your ego. I feel I think that as a young person, even myself, let me just talk about myself. You're very, as a young person, I felt that, very defensive, very couldn't take feedback, not good at receiving feedback, and just you're hung up on your program or that's not it. And if you think that's so one dimensional, and, having been in this field in a long time and having such a great leader as I grew up through this field, forced me not to be one dimensional, and I hire staff that know things that I don't know. My staff is great at programming, and I'm always going to them for things because that's usually, as a young strength coach, that's usually the area you're into. You're into the programming, how many programs do I know or can I get to know, and the technology and blah, blah, blah. And I'm I've been doing this a long time. I know my program's solid, but I want to hear what you know. And I go to my staff for things like that. And I, as a leader, that's important as well. Just because I'm a leader doesn't mean I know everything or even that I should. I hire people that know things that I don't know because it makes us a better staff, a well-rounded staff, and we can learn from each other. So it's not really, being a leader is not about me. It's about them. It's about developing them. And that's hard. That's hard, being on the floor and doing the same day to day as them, but also being their leader and trying to grow them, as a challenge.
And next, I want to speak on kind of what you mentioned about potentially having a mentor, but just asking those a ton of different questions to a ton of different people and kind of checking your ego at the door. And a really good friend of mine at USC, he's been on the podcast twice, and I called him about potential, just a job opportunity that came up, and he's a very straightforward guy, and I knew that he was. And he goes, bro, honestly, on paper, I don't see you getting where you want to go right now, and I knew that was going to happen, but I knew that I needed him to tell me that, and so that's just one example to where, did I want to hear that? Obviously not, every job I apply for, it's I'll get a job or interview. And I've gotten 6 no's out of 45 job applications, and one interview. And then on the other side, kind of like a mentor, I literally asked my mentor, I was yesterday, 6 athletes at the field, they were talking during the warm up, they were just super distracted. It took a while. I was really frustrated. How do I get better at managing bigger group? It's 6. How do you get better at managing bigger groups of athletes? Because in the private field, it's usually smaller. And if I want to go to college, then I have to get better at that. And did I want to admit that I had some issues handling 6 kids? No. But I want to become the best coach I can be. I want to work on those skills that are going to help me get to where I believe I want to go. And then we had this conversation of, well, they're e-learning, sitting at a screen all day. These are the first kids or first people besides their parents that they've interacted with all day. So they're outside, they're not looking at a screen, they're with kids their age, and they think, where I work is TC Boost, they think it's fun. So is there really going to be no talking? you know, and then how do you kind of steer into that skid? You know, if the energy is up, then you got to be a little bit more quiet. If the energy is kind of down, if they're kind of just like zombies from e-learning, then you have to bring it that day, you know, and like having to figure out and navigate and learning how to not be super structured. You know, that's why I think I might like college, because I know my athletes want to be there. I want to know when they're there and all this kind of stuff, but having to understand that there is going to be a little bit of chaos and being okay with it. And like, that was the conversation that like led my Whoop numbers to be insane. You know, my 10x day streak for strain is insane, just because I've been so much more into it, because it was just a conversation that I admitted that there was something I could get better at. So whether it's something career oriented or whether it's something that you actually do, like you can go do it yourself, or you can ask people that have been there, done that. And like, it's like, I have imposter syndrome all the time. I'm like, who am I asking all of these people for their time? You know, and when they give me 2, 3, 4 phone calls, I'm like, what did I do to deserve like these people being so nice to me? But, you know, it's just like closed mouth doesn't get fed. Like the answer is always no if you don't ask. So I think that there's so much value in putting your ego at the door when you know what you think you need to hear to help you kind of get to where you want to go. And then I'll kind of let you speak if that's inspiring anything.
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with you. You definitely need to have mentors, and I have mentors. I mean, everybody should have mentors, you know, I'd like just people you can go to, like not only just in your field, but someone that's going to speak truth about you as a person as well. So it's not just about your skills. But you know, that's interesting that you said that you went to someone that was going to be so direct with you and tell you that like on paper, you know, that, you know, like you need to build that resume, you know, and or get out there, or just have somebody to speak for you. I mean, it doesn't like, that's important as well. Like networking, like you said, but also just doing the job and, you know, we all want things, like having those expectations. Well, I want this and I deserve this. Well, if you go through life with that, you're not going to win. It's just not a winning mindset, you know, because like that's an entitlement. Like stop with the entitlement. Like, I don't care if you have like the best resume and you have director experience and you've done these things, like, and you know, I heard someone say like, with my resume, I have like, I haven't even gotten like callbacks, and like with my resume, I would expect this salary. I was like, well, good luck. You know, like you have to be able like to make it in our field. I mean, unless you're in some sort of specialty position, which I consider like, you know, a leadership position, like you're being hired as a director and or like football or basketball in our field in the college setting. Like those are jobs that like you will likely get a higher offer right off the bat than you would just an assistant strength and conditioning position, regardless of your teams. And, you know, just saying that, like, I had to work my way up for 17 years to be where I am, not only to get like a director title, but just even earn the salary that I earned. So like, even if you're like mid-range strength and conditioning coach, like been in the field like for 3 or 4 years and like, just like being like, I deserve more money. Okay. Why? Like, why do you deserve, like, what have you added value to, like, just you being here, like training your teams is, everybody's doing that. So why, like, if I'm on a staff of 5, like, why do you deserve more money? Or, you know, like, what have you done to like add to the staff? Like your teams like you? Cool. You know, like that's your job, you know? So, I mean, I think like, while it's nice to give everybody like, you know, more money, and everybody wants more money. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like we should. And, you know, just like you said, like a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So if you don't ask, like it's likely it won't happen. But, like, I think that like, I hate saying this, but like pay your dues a little bit. Like, especially for like, you're talking to someone that's been in this field for 17 years. So I don't have a problem saying pay your dues. It might sound like come off wrong, but I paid my dues, you know, and I am continuing to grow and put myself in the challenging situations and like making like myself like worth something, you know. It just doesn't stop here, you know. And knowing like your strengths and weaknesses and or your areas of improvement. And so like that's where it comes down to like ego. Like, cool that you've been to these big schools, that doesn't mean anything. Like, I mean, really, honestly, like you could have like 5 Power Five schools in your resume, and I'm going to ask you, why did you move around 5 times? Like if you've been, it'd be different if you're like, hey, listen, I'm working this full-time job, and then I've done internships at these places. But if you've had like 5 full-time jobs at Power Five schools, I'm gonna be like, well, why have you moved around 5 times? You're talking to someone that hasn't. So if you want this job, like, I mean, you need to prove to me that like you're the one, and that like you're landing this job because like you belong here. And I know that like one of your questions was like, what's your advice to somebody like, with resumes and, how to like grow in the field. And I am stealing this term from somebody that I heard on some sort of professional development I was doing, earlier in the, during COVID, and bloom where you're planted. Bloom where you're planted. So be grateful that you have a job, number one, because there's a lot of people out there that don't have one. Be grateful that you're in a job that's like awesome. Like we train athletes and then we go to sports games. So we have an awesome job, like crush it, like crush the job, like, and not just the job around the job. Like be the person in the athletic staff that like you're at, or wherever you're at, like your organization, your company, be the person that like people want to be around. Be the person that like when somebody needs help with something, you're like, oh, that's not my job. That's not on my job description. Don't do that. Be the person that, like picks up the trash off the field and not complain about it. Like be like add other values. Like, and I believe, and I believe that like it'll take care of itself. But one thing I will say is that strength coaches have a tendency to just kind of put their heads down at work. Like we're terrible at talking good about ourselves. I mean, having been on a recent job interview, I'm like, this was coming from one of like my colleague mentors that I was asking questions to. He's like, Angie, like I landed this job and I am still bad at like talking about myself and how much value I do add. Like there's something about us strength and conditioning. We're too humble sometimes, like too humble when it comes to, saying the good things that we do. So, when you're on it, like if you are in an interview, like you have to sell yourself. Like I'm definitely not saying like be cocky or something like that, like coming across like you are the greatest, but coming across like being excited about who you are and what values that you add to like whatever job that you would be applying for, like is important, and showing that excitement and showing that value and having references that can speak to that value. And as I definitely suggest, like young people, like number one, like always ask your references like before you put them down as a reference, because that's happened to me multiple times that, you've had like former staff or interns, like not even aware, like let that, that they are putting you down a reference, and you get like a surprise call. And I'm like, I can speak to the fact that, what they did with us, but like, that's not professional courtesy to not let a reference know that, that you've put them down. But so, those are simple yet very like impactful things. And I'm just going to go back to where I'm saying, like, I think the words bloom where you planted essentially take care of themselves. Like, be great in what you're doing and be excited about doing it.
And I love that phrase. And I referenced earlier, like maximizing where you're at. And I got this from a few other Samson interviews that I did, where it's like, if you can't handle getting both golf teams and both cross country teams, like what makes you think that you can handle football? And if you can't handle that D3 role, like what makes you think you can handle that Power Five, right? And if you can't like crush your session with that 12-year-old that doesn't want to be there, what makes you think you can crush, and it's just like, and this is another conversation I had with my mentor, and kind of just how am I, like, what's my headspace at with this job search? And like, call it whatever you want to call it, universe, destiny, but like, I'm not ready for whatever job I want. So how do I maximize here to be ready when that opportunity comes, and like, and if you're just trying to like clock in, clock out, like you don't deserve that job, and then which brings me to my next point I want to talk about, like how you reference paying your dues, and like, you don't deserve it, and like the fact that I just admitted that I applied to 45 jobs, I got 6 no's in one interview, like either my resume's not right on paper or my resume, regardless of how I write it up, just isn't right. And that's a sucky thing to realize. and it's one thing to have someone say, yo, like, you think you're it, but you're not. And it's one thing for someone to say that and say, you don't deserve it, but here's how you earn it. You know, you have to do X, you have to do Y, you have to do Z. Because those are two completely different conversations, right? You have to have someone that's going to tell you how it is, but then you have to have someone who's been there, done that to help guide you to, like, you don't deserve it, but here's how you can earn it. And then the last thing, we'll chat for, I don't know, 5-10 more minutes just to keep this a decent length episode. I had 7 questions, but I really enjoyed this conversation. Could you speak on the mentors that you have had in the past and just how you've leaned on them? Because that's a question that I've been asked recently was, like, what is mentorship? Because I reference my mentor a lot. And like when I was at TCU in Texas, we emailed every other week, and that was huge. And now it's, you know, my mentor and I will Zoom, even though we work, you know, we'll Zoom in the morning because he's at his house and I'm at mine. And then we'll kind of chat 30 minutes before the facility closes, you know? So kind of what mentorship means to you and how to go about kind of finding one, asking for one, or just like what it means to you.
Well, somebody gave another, I've been doing a lot of professional development, everyone that was like webinar, Zoom happy in the beginning in our field. So it was like, join everything. Everybody's doing something. And it was a book, you know, that someone was speaking about the difference between mentorship and coaching. And a mentor is going to, like, while they may know you, they're going to tell you like what your strength and, you know, like what they think your strengths are, like what they think like your areas of improvement are, because it's a one-sided conversation, really, because they know you in this space, and you can sit there and you can talk about your perspective of yourself, but they are not seeing what you're saying. So they only know what you're saying. Does that make sense? But a coach is different. So a coach is somebody that is, and it can be like get some coaching from your mentor, but a coach is actually maybe somebody in a space that is seeing you every day and is like, you know, like saying, like being willing to take feedback in your current space. Now, I don't know if like you own the facility. I don't know if you're working underneath somebody, but like getting feedback from people that are actually seeing you in your day-to-day is helpful. And like, whether it be like you're sending a survey out to like kids and parents, or, you know, you are sending us like, and it can be anonymous, or like you sending a survey out to, you know, or like you're like you'd like talk to your boss, if you will, like on a day-to-day, like about things and blah, blah. And they might be like, I want you to do this or blah, blah, or do what you want or blah, blah. But like actually sitting down and having the conversation, like, listen, I want you to be honest with me and like tell me what you think my areas of improvement are, and just be honest, because I'm a bit self-deprecating in my own personal annual reviews, and like it's usually like my boss, like the one that I spent so many years with, like he's like, you say this about yourself, but like you actually are organized. And I like tell him I'm not organized or something like that, but I still want that conversation. Like even though I sat in an office with him and like see him and can talk to him anytime I want that official review. Like, so and that's, I mean, it's hard to hear like things that you feel like, I mean, maybe sometimes it's not, because you're like, yes, I totally get that. Like, that's how I see it. Like, I mean, because if like unless they just really don't care about you and they're not a nice person, that's a different story. But there's always some truth into what they're saying, regardless of how nice they're putting it, you know? So if they say, well, you know, maybe you could do this, I'm like, okay, like that, maybe that's something you haven't thought of. So I think coaching is important as much as mentorship is, because I feel like mentorship can be one-sided. I think that mentorship can be like, I'm having a conversation with you, like, what would you do in this situation? You know, blah, 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 you know, let's talk shop. But when it comes to like actually improving who you are, I feel like you need coaching, you know, and that's different, and you should see it different. And coaching is different to everybody, you know? So I feel that that's kind of what I am to my staff at times. Like it's coaching them through a situation. It's having those hard conversations and saying, this is what you could do to be better in this situation. And it's not always about it's never actually really about your ability to write a program or not. It's not. It's about like your professionalism or your lack thereof, or it's about, you know, like your personality or something like that, like how you come across, how many times I heard like my, Jason say to me, like, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Like these are things that I heard as a very like young person, because I already spoke to my directness. Like, and some point that stuck, and there's some times when I'm just going to be me and say it the way I want to say it, because I feel like you need to hear it like I'm going to say it. But I think about that now, where before I just said it and didn't think about the consequence of whether that was going to be helpful in the situation or not. So I think that I mentors, how do you get a mentor? Networking, developing relationships, personal, like just, going in a personal, like the personal development space, and, reading books and reaching out and following people's websites and Instagrams and Twitters. And, there's a lot of people that meet people just via social media, and then like developing a relationship with that person is important. It's relationship. And like sometimes that you might be like talking to someone because they might have information that you want to know, but doesn't mean they should be your mentor. So it's not about like seeking like the person that the person that you feel like is the top of our field. Like if I get to that person, I'm going to get the answers. I think it has to be a good fit as well. And also I would say, like, lastly, like be willing to spend money on it. I actually, a friend of mine hired, she started kind of like I wouldn't call it like life coach. I mean, it was like life coaching, business coaching. She started a business and I hired her, and I kind of was like, and it was like, when you're paying for a conversation, you're paying to get something out of it. So when you put money down on something, you're more willing to actually put a little bit more time into it than if it were free, so like, especially if you're speaking to someone that like you really don't know and you're trying to reach out and you're trying to ask for their time, like that's kind of like, all right, listen, like I'm willing to like take you to lunch, like I'm willing to pay for this hour, like be willing to like put some money down on it, because like, well, I mean, money creates value, but I mean, it's also that person's time. So, I mean, I paid for like a service that just how, it was more professional development, decision making, like just really working through steps. It wasn't me like reading a book or listening to a podcast where I'm like, that's great, that's great. It was actually like, here are action steps. And when we talk next week and you're paying for next week's session, did you take those action steps? So there's different levels of coaching and mentorship, but I think that those are just like a couple points to have the expectation of when you're seeking out that kind of service.
And I wish I had a more formal answer about how to attain it and how to like screen for people. And I like how you mentioned, like, it can just be someone that posts really good content, and it could be something more formal where I literally asked them, I was like, hey, can I be or can you be my mentor? And then like how it's manifested itself has like changed throughout the years. So I think it's a combination of well, I guess I'll give a little bit more context. He and I used to have all these conversations. Like I literally end it with, dang it, Steve, like I'm not going to sleep tonight, just because my brain was going on a convo. So I knew that he was someone that I wanted to chat with. Or honestly, like you just enjoy how they speak, you enjoy the type of content they produce, and you just like kind of vibe with them. And then you say, hey, I've been following your stuff. I love XYZ article. Like I understand you're a very busy person. If you're ever in town, let me pick you up from the airport, whatever it may be. And honestly, like I've had some calls with like pro people, and like it was not a good conversation,
Yeah.
So it's who's going to provide the most value to you, who knows you as a person, and who's going to say you don't deserve it, you're not all that cut out, but here's how you can get to where you want to go. I think that, like I'm super fortunate to how it's played out for me, and like it takes a village to raise a kid, it takes a village to raise a professional. Like all of these things I've gotten from a lot of smart people and nice people, and I'm super grateful for that. People like yourself. So I'm going to end on that, there's the challenges and the fulfillments of different jobs. And then you can also lean on other people that have been there, done that can help you get to where you want to go. But how those people come into your life, tell me the story, because I don't know how it's going to play out for the listener, but I want to say thank you very much for your time. This hopefully probably going to be a 3.0 episode in the future, because we touched on one of my 7, and that was the background. So thank you very much for your time and just for kind of pulling the curtain back on just your life and your experiences. And I really enjoyed this a lot, and I look forward to the next one.
Great. Thanks for having me.